one's actually pretty short. And it's kind of cut off because it's, I don't know. Is there any way we can fix that? Anyone? Someone? I have no idea. Lose. Well, I can just read you the title of the slides. Anyway, so that is about Lori Holden. So this is me. My website, of course, you can find me on IRC. About this presentation, the presentation will cover the features of SQL, using SQL with Merb, why I chose SQL over the alternatives, and the complications that I've had using SQL with Merb. This is just from this SQL website. It's just the snippet of their features. So, it supports quite a few databases and yada yada. So some examples. Pretty simple, doing a select from the database, kind of ignoring, acting as an ORM. But what's nice is that you're getting back data sets, and you can use them just like you would for doing normal queries with like models. You can also get like a handle to a post, like in this example, a handle to a table, which is just another data set object that you can do filters on. And then at the bottom, you can see me using filters. So here I'm just filtering down the query to categories with Ruby and Postgres in them. So more examples. If you can do it in SQL, you can do it in SQL. Adding an index, inserting a new record. You can see in this case I'm not actually creating any new object or anything for throwing the data into the table. I'm just doing this standard append. And also what's kind of nice is how it's really easy to build queries. So in this case you can see that I'm doing a union and the SQL that's generated for that. So you have chaining, which basically means that instead of like throwing all your parameters and conditions and everything into a big statement, you just take the individual parts. Each piece that you call is going to return a dataset object. So here we're getting the initial dataset object from DB items, and then we want to do a select of X, Y, and Z columns. And then we're going to filter it down based on, X being more than 1 and yada, yada. And then below that, you can see the SQL generated from it. And of course, you can do your standard models, which, it's kind of important. It does pretty much everything you would expect it to. The syntax is a little bit different. And validations are kind of nice because they're slightly scoped out. I just think it looks better and easier to read. At the bottom, you can see querying a post object from finding a post object with the title of Hello World. And of course, it supports migrations. The migrations are pretty much your standard migrations. Nothing really new. But of course, if you're a fan of inline schema stuff, like with Data Mapper, SQL also supports that. Pagination. The one thing that always kind of irks me is the fact that most ORMs don't support pagination natively, which is odd because databases do. But so it's just part of it. You can chain additional filters on top of your pagination filter. And then, of course, a little plug for my Merb pagination plugin. It's really easy just to use it in your Merb application. And the neat thing that I find about SQL is its command line support. I've stopped using like the MySQL and the PSQL, and the SQL binaries for doing like database manipulation. So which, like I said earlier, anything you can do in SQL, you can do it in SQL. So in this case, you can see that I'm actually pointing the SQL command line binary at my config database file. Get a list of tables, print out parts of the schema. It works pretty good, I think. Installing it's pretty simple. For configuring Merb, I like to have like auto timestamp support. So that's like one of the few things that SQL doesn't support natively, which is fine. There's a plugin for doing that. And then, of course, use your standard database .yaml file. And then you just get to start coding. Things should mostly, just work. Of course, when I started working with SQL and Merb, I couldn't really do much because like Merb helpers didn't support SQL. It was just kind of messy. So I've been working on fixing that. So why would you use SQL? It's been around for a while. They're at their, I think, 2.5 release right now. Released fairly recently. It supports a large number of databases, like pretty much everything you can think of. I really love the query support in it. The way you can chain filters together, or you can build. Actually, I think I might have had a slide for this, but it's not here. But you can actually take, just really complicated SQL expressions and write code to do those. So I think it's flexible, like when you need it. It's definitely easier to get down and dirty when you need to, which I know like anyone who has to do like really complicated database work, like with Active Record, it's just not possible sanely. And it still manages to not be too overkill, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with ones that, ORMs that are. So complications, the poor Merb helper support, which I've been working on. I have a couple small patches contributed that should get into 1.0. So SQL should be fully usable for the most part after the 1.0 release. And, of course, there's not that many developers using SQL currently, at least in the Merb camp. And that's it, So if anyone has any questions, I'd love to answer them. Oh, and just to note, I'm not an expert, so.
So is Yellow Pages using this at all in production for anything?
Currently, Yellow Pages isn't. Yellow Pages is considering Merb for some of our internal stuff, along with SQL, but not quite yet. We're still working on getting it into the company. I'm currently the only one that has a large amount of any Merb experience, but we have a lot of developers who have interest and are ramping up and really want to bring it into the company.
How big of a web team does Yellow Pages?
Oh God, it depends on which team. I think I'm on the what team I am. Overall, we have about 18 Rails developers. Of course, we also have even more. Is it .NET?
We got all kinds.
Yeah, and we have Java
On the
and.
business side, what do you do? Those guys do like processing, transactions, and whatnot. So
Yeah.
when people buy that.
The fun people get to play with Rails.
Yeah,
But.
we're up on the fourth floor and throw balls at each other. It's great.
Hello. This thing is low battery, by the way. So yeah, we should make sure SQL works with Merb 1.0.
Mm-hmm.
That said, Merb helpers has, I'm realizing now, a relatively undocumented. We consider the errors thing to be an API that ORMs should support or the ORM plugins should support. So if the errors thing
The errors thing was a very, very, very simple fix that didn't really change so much how it affected the other ORMs, but it just made it a little more lenient, which
Right.
is what was needed for supporting SQL.
What I'm getting at is I think we should make sure that there's SQL data map or an active record we know about, but there's other random people like CalcRest that want to support it, and I think the right solution, instead of making sure we have a bunch of if statements that says if you're SQL, do this, is to come up with to solidify the API that we're using right now so that everyone can add it into their ORMs or their ORM plugins and make it just work correctly.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like in the patches that I'm doing, I'm making sure to stay away from doing like if statements. Conditionals on if we're using this ORM or this ORM. Sometimes there's a common place that you can pull from. With the exception of one monkey patch, basically making SQL support new record where it uses new instead, new question mark. But.
All right. Yeah, I think that sort of thing should go into the ORM plugins so that it just works without having to do crazy things in helpers.
I think the microphone died.
How do you do testing?
I have to hear the question to repeat it.
How do you do testing?
Testing with SQL.
Yeah, do you do any model generation or?
Oh yeah. Actually, I believe that came up on my slides. Yeah, here you'll notice that when you generate a model, it'll automatically provide specs. Or actually, no, it won't. Yeah, it will. And migrations, but it's just standard spec stuff. It should be very similar to doing data mapper.
So like fixtures or, do you have anything like that you use for generating test data?
Personally, I actually kind of stay away from fixtures, at least.
Or like factories or
Yeah.
just something along the lines to generate test data?
Yeah, personally, I've been using factories for that and trying to rely on the model itself to be a little more intelligent. I honestly don't know how many other ways you can use SQL for you can test with SQL.
Any more questions?
I was just curious how the performance of SQL compares to data mapper or active record.
It's actually pretty fast. That's one of the reasons why I use it. I don't have any numbers or anything, but I would say that it's at least on par with data mapper. Outside of that, I don't have anything